things didn't have to be like this. A food forest is a part of the woods where the entire forest itself is designed and cultivated so that everything is edible. So that every single part of those woods is an edible plant, a berry, or a plant that helps to keep the soil fresh for the edible plants. It's a section of the woods set aside to be a grocery store. We're told about the First Nations people going out into the woods and scavenging, and we picture in our brains our modern woods laced with poison ivy, full of simple goldenrod and dead branches. But we only have to go back 300 years to see a world where you had a outdoor grocery store where the entire outside is just simply a place to go where you need food. And naturally, you have tons of fruits, tons of berries, tons of very natural settings, so it attracts animals. You have deer, you have wolves, you have the creatures that you would also want to sustain. You can shoot a couple and take them in for venison, for whatever you need. This is the world that we used to have. Now, this is not entirely going to be complaining about the modern world, but it will be pointing out some things that simply don't have to be the way they are. That's the approach. Music loud. I can fix that right away. There we go. We live in a world right now that is unfit for humans. We live in a world right now that is recrafted into what humans could do with it, but into one that is fundamentally unsuited for us. And that's a strange situation. I'm going to be talking this video about some things that we just accept as necessary and questioning them. I'm going to talk this video about, well, Tanzi, the character that I'm playing in today, and what I'm planning on doing with her in the future, with myself in the future as well. And I'm going to be talking about the things that are actively destroying the world right now. AI is an incredible tool, but also an incredible threat, an existential one for some lines of work. And fundamentally, the incompatibility between corporatism and creativity. That is the plan, and that is what I hope that you will join me for today. This is Unfocused Thoughts, a series in which I effectively make an unscripted video essay on the fly and present it to all of you. Thank you for joining me. Shall we begin? It seems unhinged to even consider the idea. This should be looping. Why is this not looping? Why are you not looping? I want you to loop. This should be a looping thing. I need audio. It seems absurd to imagine that the world could have these food forests. When I first heard about them, I had to stop and catch my breath. I had to stop and reconsider and recontextualize everything that I had been taught. Because the idea that food was just freely available to anybody who needed it is fundamentally incompatible with how we have our culture now. We can't even put food on public lands because people will complain that it might fall on the ground and rot, and that could be stinky, or that it'll attract homeless people who want to eat, or it'll attract animals, animals that we don't want to have, because who would want to have animals in a place where humans live? I don't know. Maybe all of us? Maybe some of us? Maybe enough of us that we have good soil and land that we should welcome it, use it, make it functional. But when I say people are against it, I don't actually mean humans. I mean the opposite of humans. Corporations. There is an old fallacy. The right to be fed. I mean, hunger is by nature is a considered human right to everyone except the US. And the thing is, Rome is actually a fantastic example of this. A lot of people who I don't like and who don't think I should exist believe in have the Roman supremacy. They'll hold up Rome as this ideal. They'll put busts of Roman emperors as their profile pictures on Twitter. And Rome gave bread to all of its citizens. I don't mean poverty breadlines. I don't mean bread that's being handed out to the poor people who need it. I mean that all households had a bread ration, and all bakers were paid by state to give out bread, and all the bread was marked with a baker's mark, similar to how you would stamp a sword with iron, and that way they could trace the bread back to its maker if there was a problem with it, if there was a mistake, or if someone was adding sawdust or adding something into it to make it cheaper, trying to save money by making a worse product. The baker could suffer some dire consequences. Admittedly, some untenable consequences by today's standards, but they were held accountable for making sure that everybody had some food and that the food that they gave out was good enough quality. Food is just the beginning of this. There is a fallacy, and if I get one comment on this video, it will be someone saying this and pretending that I went the whole video without bringing it up. The tragedy of the commons. The tragedy of the commons is not real. It is a theory that states that if there is an area where anything can be done for free, then it will be abused and no one will have it. If you have a common area where anybody can have a public resource and everybody will act in their own interests, doing so will ultimately deplete the resource. This is only true when businesses are involved. We have entire regions, entire continents where that has not been true. But people believe it because, specifically of England, where it was true, but not because of the people. Not because of the people, because of the corporations. The corporations decided that they were going to be controlling it. They said, oh, a free resource. This is mine now. I'm taking this. It was not the people. People are, by and large, good. I was brought up with the idea that people are terrible. I was brought up with the idea not that people were terrible in the sense of that people are wretched, but in the sense that you should never talk to strangers because somebody might hurt you. While strictly true, somewhere in the range of 90% of kidnappings and violence are caused by someone that is close to the individual, somebody who is connected to the person. A stranger is much more likely to help you, is much more likely to be there with you, but we are taught that that's not true. We were brought up with this philosophy of separation, this mentality of internal segregation, not just about race or not just about class, but that other people are the problem. And some people buy into this so deeply that it is not simply other people that are the problem, it is in fact anybody who isn't them. Why, when this also can become self-fulfilling in the same way that corporations will look at a common area and say, we'll take everything in there because that's free labor, that's free land, that's free crops. If anybody can take it, we'll take all of it and sell it, and that's how we'll make our money. In the same way, people don't generally do that. They can be taught to do that. If you are taught... Let me swap this. If you are taught that everything that you create can, in fact, be taken from you, then yes, you will learn very quickly that you have to take. You will learn that you must take if you want to survive. It will not be a dog-eat-dog world, but it will generate a dog-eat-dog world where one does not have to exist. Where one does not have to exist. Well, if I don't take it, somebody else will, they say. as they take several armfuls of tomatoes that were going to be given out to anybody who wanted a tomato. Well, it's not regulated, so therefore anybody can have it, right? They'll say, as middle-class women go to the homeless shelter and take bags of food meant for people who are starving in order simply to buffer their grocery bill so that they can go on vacation, so that they can take a holiday overseas. This mentality of, it's free, and if I don't take it, somebody else will abuse the system, stems from an idea that the system must be abused by someone, and if I don't do it, somebody else will gain that right, somebody else will gain that effect, somebody else will take what could be mine. Somebody else will take what could be mine. This isn't how humans are built. This isn't how we evolved. This isn't how... You know what? It doesn't even matter if you have a separate religious ideology. This isn't how humans evolved, but if you don't believe in evolution, I don't care. Because this isn't how humans were created. This isn't how humans were designed, if you want to look at it in that direction either. It doesn't matter what side you're on. This isn't who we are. And fundamentally, I feel like people know that. I think there's a part of all of us that recognizes that other people tend to be good given a chance. And one of the things that is fairly consistent is that knowing people in different walks of life is the best way to destroy any sort of racism, sexism, ideological difference. Knowing people and recognizing them as human as opposed to othering them and pretending that they simply don't exist. But Jade, you say, but Tanzi, you say, if you want to be trendy and cool with the kids. This doesn't sound like your normal streams. What are you doing? This isn't what you talk about. This is the channel that we go to get away from that. This is the channel where we have funny conversations about butts and when we're playing video games. This is the channel where you, just last night, were looking at, we're playing tabletop games with friends and making funny jokes. What's going on? See, I've had a problem for a while. I like Tanzi. I like this character. I like, you know, this model that I had commissioned. The model actually is available to anybody who wants it. The skin and the outfit are parts that are custom, unlike Jade, which is entirely custom model. But regardless, I knew that I wanted to use Tanzi more often. And I was planning on using this model for talking about more adult things. Things like, you know, drugs, sex, rock and roll, if you want to think of it in that sense. Going through discussions of consent and kink that are very much still in the theme of the channel and wholesome and uplifting and positive, but things that are not necessarily child friendly, sex positivity. But that's not really the direction that the channel wanted to go. I don't want to be a lewd tuber. I don't want to be mistaken for someone who makes, you know, lewd and titillating content. I don't really do that here. So I didn't know what to do with this, so I started phasing out my use of Tanzi because there were less and less opportunities. I started using Tanzi in situations that didn't really call for it, like on the Monday D&D game. It didn't make sense. And now I think I know what Tanzi is here for, and I'll get back to the discussions in just a moment. This is the channel update part where I slide in a couple of discussion points about where we're going with the channel. And that is quite simply, Tanzi is going to be for crumbling content. On the Discord, we have an entire channel dedicated towards crumbling infrastructure, not politics, not talking about individual politicians or policies or whatnot, but about things that are breaking the world. Things that are destroying both our day-to-day life and the society that we live in, and sort of reconsidering what life could be. There isn't anything inherent in life, in humanity, in who we are, that is related to chimps. We try to push this idea that humans are related to chimpanzees. Chimpanzees with their fierce, hierarchical, near-dictatorial systems. These chimps with their aggressive, violent nature and their fascism. These chimpanzees, these beasts that strike out and lash out at each other constantly. That's really not who we are. What we are, if anything, is bonobos. We are cultural, we are communal, and we believe, in general, humanity believes in uplifting each other as people and involving in pleasure. If the more you know about bonobos, the more that last line will make sense. But we have the people who want the most, the greedy, the people who have people that they simply must appease. Investors. And those individuals will do anything it takes to keep their job. Destroy everything. And that is terrifying. It's horrifying. And again, this channel is generally supposed to be about stepping away from that, creating a space where people can escape that, where people can look at the world, look at themselves, look at me, and just not have to worry about the outside world. But if you see the red border on the thumbnail, if you see Tanzi, and this will be true of TikTok too, if you see Tanzi there, then it's going to have a different tone. I am livid about a lot of things, and a big part of the channel is what I need, and what hand goes this way, tracking, what I need. And generally what I need is to be Jade, is to be the light, is to help other people find happiness, to be that joy that brings other people joy, because that brings me happiness as well. But I also get real mad about things sometimes. There was a game that came out recently. I was ready to play it. I wanted to play it for the channel. I was excited to play Legends of Mana for the channel. A game just, that was it, Legends? Visions, sorry, not Legends, Visions. I was hyped for Visions of Mana. I still had to double check the title because I do get mixed up between the English and the Japanese titles. I was hyped to play Visions of Mana. I wanted to play it. I love the Mana series. Seiken Densetsu 1, that is to say Final Fantasy Adventure, is one of the few games I had for the Game Boy. I played through that game dozens of times. I would go on 14-hour road trips with my family across the country, and I would play that game for the entire time that I was in the car, and I loved it. I would play that Seiken Densetsu 2, Secret of Mana for the Super Nintendo, with my friends, and we would have our characters and we would play through it multiple times. The game is jank, the game is strange and weird, and honestly not even very good in some places, but I still loved it. Seiken Densetsu 3, I don't remember how that was released in North America, but the third game in the series, I only found long before it was available in English from a fan translation. One of the first times I was able to get a fan translation working because I was so excited to play it, and now Visions of Mana exists. Why am I talking about this? I'm talking about crumbling things. I'm talking about this world falling apart. Well, it is. Everybody who worked on Visions of Mana was fired on the day that the game was released, before reviews were in, before the first month of sales, before the first day of sales, before anything. Every single person who worked on Visions of Mana was fired. They had the pink slips printed before the game hit the shelves. They were ready before the game came out. They had already decided that once the game launched, and the game looks wonderful! The game looks delightful! It has a class system, something we haven't seen in Secret of Mana since the third entry. Something that feels more like a Final Fantasy V system, which I constantly refer to as the best mechanical Final Fantasy game in the series. It was so good in everything that I've seen. And I believe the Metacritic was like 87% as well on launch. The company had already decided before the game shipped that everybody who worked on it was going to question where their next meal was coming from. That everybody who worked on it was going to be fired. Everybody who worked on it was going to wonder what they did wrong. I'm boycotting the game. I mean, I don't think it's unfair for me to do so. Maybe I'll get it in a year or two if the company makes some good choices. Maybe I won't. Maybe I'll wait. I'll get it through the high seas. But I generally try to avoid that because I do want to support the developers. But buying the game no longer supports the developers, does it? I'm not advocating for piracy, but I am advocating for being very angry at the companies that do this. I am advocating for direct action in ways that it will actually affect the industry. That it'll affect the people who are willing to do this. Two weeks. 2 weeks in this past year has the video games industry gone without layoffs. A layoff being defined by a significant number of people being let go at once, a significant number of people simultaneously being let go. 2 weeks. And yes, you can see my heart. You can see how passionate my heart is right here. It's true. There is a graph that I forgot to get before the stream started that was a simple Google Doc showing all of the layoffs in the games industry over the past year. The longest gap in between layoffs was 2 weeks. Muse Dash. Muse Dash was a phenomenal game, critically acclaimed, outstanding. The Metacritic on it, I'm gonna check right now, live. As of right now, it's 73, which is considered respectable. But by and large, it was considered much higher by well-respected names, industry names. And everybody who worked on that, once again, they closed the studio. Why? Because the company, and this is true. Was it Hi-Fi? Yeah, I'm sorry, Hi-Fi Rush. Wait, you're absolutely right, not Muse Dash. Muse Dash is the older one. I do get those two confused. Where's the Metacritic on this? Hi-Fi Rush Metacritic is 87. User score, 8.8, so 88 out of 100. 90 on PC. 90. Looking through the reviews, it's 100, 10 out of 10, 10 out of 10, 10 out of 10, 90. It is an outstanding game. It is an excellent game by any possible metric. Do you know why the studio was closed? I do. I know directly why the studio was closed. I know why the studio was closed. Because the studio closed down any department that didn't have an upcoming release in the next 18 months. Any studio that didn't have an upcoming release in the next year was trimmed. That's the official reason. That's the reason given to the investors. We're trimming we are going to save you money by cutting any studio that is not currently working on a product. Well, guess what? Hi-Fi Rush was released. It came out. They weren't working on a project anymore. So they let them all go. Now, the silver lining to this is that another publisher has bought up and hired every single person who worked on Hi-Fi Rush. So there is a bit of a silver lining that the people who worked on it are not going to be without job. But the fact that it happened at all is a catastrophe. You could have gone into the forest this morning, picked a handful of berries and a couple of nuts, come home, spent an hour or two making something a dish out of it, and with some meat that you had salted and stored. You could have then picked up a lute and gone into town and started playing for people. You know, I have had, you know, a healthy number of people on this channel. Not so many, but let me just look a thing, check up. The largest audience that Shakespeare played to was 3,000 people. I have 10,000 followers on TikTok. I'm not that far off of 3,000 on the YouTube. I mean, you know, I'm getting there. But, I mean, I am currently at 2,752. The most number that Shakespeare played to live was at the Globe Theatre at 3,000. We used to live in a culture where every region has its own bards, its own performances that were unique, interesting, different. Thank you very much. I am going to mute the audio for that because it is a little bit more serious in tone, but I really do appreciate that. Where's that audio coming from? That should be good for a few seconds. So, thank you very much, Solanum. I really do appreciate that. So, there used to be a lot more performances. There used to be a lot more people who would perform. A lot more people who were making art. And now, Mr. Beast has how many followers? I forgot to check recently. It's a lot. And I don't think that's entirely a bad thing, because we do have movies. We do have the ability to reach a wider audience, and even someone who is smaller like me can reach a larger audience as well. There is a lot more that we can do, but it also means that the number of people needed to produce art has gone down. And that's terrifying to me. I've been struggling lately with the thought. I know that we're working on getting protections against AI. I know that we're working on getting things in place to prevent AI from just stealing jobs, but who's going to follow that? If you're an advertiser, you don't care. If you're an advertiser, you just want a product. You don't care about an actor. And that's how most people got into voice acting, is through advertising. If you are working on a movie, that's fantastic. How many movies have you been in? What's your resume? Can you show me your portfolio? There's a problem right now in programming. My Jade does not work right now. There's a problem right now in programming where a lot of junior developers positions are being cut, because you only need 1 or 2 people to do those junior developer positions and throw it into AI and get answers that are good enough. The code is mostly nonsense, and you need to customize it, and it needs some work done, but the bulk of the grunt work can be done by AI. And then the senior developers can do the rest. What happens when there's retiring senior developers and nobody else has had the experience as a senior developer? No junior developers have been trained to take their place. No junior developers are ready to pick up where their seniors left off. What happens in 5 years? I can tell you, we know. We actually know what happens because it happened around the same time that I was coming out of college, that I was going to college, that I was deciding a major, that I was leaving college without completing a major. We all happened around the time period of the dot-com burst. All of a sudden, a ton of software developers were coming out of the colleges. People who were promised that there would be an infinite job market, a need, a huge, massive need, an unfulfilled niche for developers, programmers, HTML coders. Tons of people were needed. We'll just go into college and come out with a degree. You'll have no problem finding a job. Would you like fries with that? We saw what happened. We saw that industry collapse. We saw the world fall apart because we didn't have an answer. Because there was people who were trained for jobs that didn't exist. Because how many people were still there and how many people were needed? How many people, what percentage of sales, what percentage of online sales are made through Amazon? 40%. 40.4% in current year. 2 out of every 5 sales are made on Amazon. You don't need other websites for sales. I mean, why would you bother? What's the point? How do you define a monopoly? Because I define it at less than 40%, that's for sure. That's controlling market share in my book. But regardless of that, what can we do? They won. They won at capitalism. They're just better at it than everybody else. All the other companies can just pack up and die because they make all the money in the world now. Oh, they don't give it to people. Oh, they don't actually, give money to anybody. That goes up the food chain. That goes to the executives. That goes to Mr. Bezos himself. Why? You pull some salted meat out of a refrigerator powered off of solar energy. You put it into you slice off a couple of thin segments of it and put it on a sandwich made of bread that somebody down the street baked for you. You thank them for it because they did a great job. They did a great job. In return, you helped pick up the leaves around their house after the last storm. That storm hit pretty hard, and you had a lot of work to do because, well, sometimes you need to pick up leaves, sometimes you need to help repair a roof, sometimes you need to support your community. So you take those couple of slices of bread, and you slice off a couple of pieces of the meat, and before you put it back in your small refrigerator, and make yourself a sandwich, put some herbs and spices on it, and sit back. There's no work for you to do today. Why, there really isn't. But there might be a storm next week, so you should get ready. Just in case. We used to have a culture that supported individuals, an individual's ability, an individual's compassion. We don't all need to work anymore. A lot of people miscontextualize the Luddites. You see, the Luddites are remembered, the word itself is synonymous with anti-technology. People who were afraid of the loom. People who destroyed the loom because they were scared of technological advancements. The word Luddite, literally right now, translates to a person opposed to new technology or ways of working. That is the definitionary from Oxford, and it is listed as derogatory. I am not kidding. Noun, derogatory. A person opposed to a new technology or way of working. English textile workers were given looms that were going to drastically increase the production of clothing in that region. They took cotton from overseas, mostly from the Americas, without asking how they got it, and they took that cotton and they would make garments, fabrics, clothing, fashion. And someone come up with a loom, a way of making garments 10 times as fast. 10 times as many sailcloths could be made at once. They didn't fear the technology. They saw that their pay was the same, while the factory was producing 10 times as much. They saw that a third of their workforce was told they didn't need to work here anymore, they didn't have a job, they didn't know where their next meal would come from, because not as many people were needed to work the factory, because these machines will take care of it for you. Don't worry, we don't need you anymore. Goodbye. They came in the night and destroyed the looms with sledgehammers. They went into the factory and shattered all of the looms, and then in the morning they went to the owner's office and said, "Look at that! The looms don't work anymore. If you want to keep on making money, you were making money beforehand. Either you give us the share of what's being made, or we'll do it again." Loblaws used to have a line of grocery checkouts, each one being managed by a human in a till, each one being managed by a lower wage worker, taking things, scanning them, and a second person putting them in a bag. An automated checkout requires one person to watch 15 checkouts. Well, that's great. That's 14 people who don't need to work anymore. That's 28 people who don't need to work anymore if you count the baggers. That's 28 people whose jobs don't need to exist. Not that for the same profit, for making the same amount of money functionally, minus a small amount of maintenance and the initial upfront cost, which is at most a single year's wages, you have effectively cut out enough of your workforce to make a lot more money. Imagine how much more money if each of those employees was being paid $20,000 a year. That's not very much. But that's still times 28, and that's still money that was not going to anyone else. Am I advocating for taking a sledgehammer into Loblaws? No, I don't think they sell them. But the fact of the matter is, we're seeing the same thing happen that has always been happening for the past couple hundred years. You sit in your house and go for a walk. You see one of your older neighbors whose yard is untidy. You're not doing anything that day because there hasn't been a storm, and your primary job is storm repair, but you're not doing anything. So you grab a lawnmower and you go take care of their yard for them. While you're doing so, you make them another sandwich, you make a meal, you make a dish, and bring it over to them, because it's a nice thing to do, to help them out. We don't have elders anymore. Think about the idea of an elder. What is it? It's not somebody who's old, I'll tell you that. Respect your elders, no. Don't respect your elders until they become elders. What is an elder? An elder is somebody who has lived a long and interesting and productive life. It is somebody who has lived and learned and now wants to pass that knowledge on to others. An elder is a teacher, not a parent, not a school professor. An elder is a wise woman, a priest in some areas of the world. An elder is somebody who you go to learn and improve yourself. We don't have those. Our old people still need to work. Our old people are not being taken care of, and so that they can propagate their knowledge, they either have to work or they simply perish. They have to sustain and subsist off of other people. They have to get jobs as a greeter where they don't get really any pay, but at least they get out of the house. Their medical bills go through the roof, but they stick on. But they they never become elders. They get old, but they never become an elder. They never had the chance. They were never given that opportunity. If you could retire at 55, at 60, and live out your remaining third of your life to give and support others, would you? Of course you would. The idea that you wouldn't is absurd. The idea that you would keep that knowledge to yourself when you could make the world better, when you could teach others, when you could give a legacy to the world, when you could make something that's remembered. Of course you would pick that. It would be absurd not to. You bring them a sandwich and say, hey, I made this for you. I hope you enjoy your lunch. I came back from the food forest this morning and I got some berries. I put them on the side of the plate. You can return the plate whenever you want, or I'll come by after the next storm. I think there's one going to be brewing this week. You take your loot and you head to the town square. You play for a little while. You don't get paid, but you don't need to. You do it because it brings you joy. You do it because it makes others happy and lets you express yourself. I don't have enough people on YouTube to make a career out of this yet. I still hope to. But YouTube right now pays for itself. YouTube right now pays for the game, the tech, the computer updates, and the time I invest in it, and covers itself. I still have to work a full-time job, and I'm going to be losing my job soon. I don't know what that means. I don't know what I'm going to do. Every part of my heart is telling me to quit everything, take my money out of savings, spend a year and a half actually working full-time on YouTube. But I also know financially it doesn't make sense to. You play your lute through the lunch rush, just strumming it and humming ditties, and a few people come and join you and leave as their mood permits. You come out of and go back to your home. You sit down and relax and stretch. It's only early afternoon now. There's plenty of time left in the day. You may have a pet. You may have a thing to go to in the evening. You may go to a tavern, not to drink, but just to be with people and talk. Streaming has replaced the idea of the third space. The third space isn't a place where you can go to see other people, to meet other people, to just exist. My generation grew up going to malls. You didn't buy anything there. You just sat around and people watched, talked with friends, just hung out. Malls don't exist anymore. It's a miracle they were allowed to exist for as long as they did. Every third space has been monetized. You can't come in unless you pay the cover charge. You can't come in unless you buy tickets. You can't come in unless you're going to pay for tokens at the arcade. You can't come here and just relax. We've made that illegal. It's called loitering. Simply existing in a public space without paying money has been made illegal. It's early evening, and the bar has been lovely. You spoke with friends, you met new people, you told stories and traded quips with people. You had a couple drinks, but not because you had to go there. Rather, because you wanted to. The people who are no longer bagging items no longer have to work. The people who were bagging items no longer have to work. The people who were working on sewing no longer have to work because of the loom. That does not mean that there's less money involved. That doesn't mean inherently that food prices go down. Look at them. Behold them and tremble. Look at the world right now. Each of the people who lost those jobs were working a job that no longer needed to be worked. And if not everybody has to work anymore, why do we still rely on a structure where if you don't work, you die? That sounds extreme, but you're not like executed if you don't work. It's ridiculous. If you don't work, you don't have food. Well, it's not like you have to work, to be able to just breathe. You have to work to be able to sleep with a roof. It's not like there's going to be a stop to technology. Maybe we have to make one. Well, that's absurd. That's aggressive. You don't mean that. No. I suppose I don't. But something has to be done. You can't build a new foundation until you tear down the walls. That's a quote from a ska song. One second here. Where is it? I'm trying to pull up this song here. Tragically, Google is trash now. The idea is true, though. If you want to change fundamentally how things work, you can't do so from inside. You can't always reform a system. I mean, that's... I know it's catch-22. There it is, a minor point. Critics cry of bloody days, but people still die anyway. The ones who understand the rules can't help us save the world. History has afforded us this opportune occasion. To form a new foundation, you must first tear down the walls. It's a beautiful song. I like it. A Minor Point by Catch-22. We, live in a world that is constantly rejecting us, that is constantly changing, and our laws are unwilling to keep up with that change. Did you know that Twitter shut down in Brazil? The entire country of Brazil was cut off from Twitter. Oh, not by Elon Musk's choice. Well, I suppose it is by his choice. I suppose it really is by his choice if you think about it. You see, there's people who are saying I saw the take just today that it was ideological, that it was caused by the Brazilian government not liking the direction that he was taking it. Literally, the quote that I saw today was, they didn't like where the site was going. No. 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 To operate in Brazil, you have to have a representative in the country. That's a law. To operate in that country, you have to have a representative there. You have to have an office. You have to follow the laws. And Elon said, what are you going to do? Ban me? And they did. It's actually extremely funny. You see, he owed over $3 million US in fines, literal fines, for breaking Brazilian law and policy. Just straight up owning a company requires you to follow certain things. Elon Musk said, what are you gonna do? Ban me? Why would he say that? He's not a smart man, but he's also is a businessman. He's lived his whole life as a businessman. He should know better. He should know, at least in some stake, what his limitations are and what he's capable of, shouldn't he? Shouldn't he? Why do we think that we're more powerful than we are? Because he thought that he was too big to fail. Have you heard that quote before? I'm not going to go into that today, but if you've heard that quote before, you know what I'm referencing. He thought that we were already in a cyberpunk dystopia. He thought that he could just say, look, I own the company. What I say goes. I am big enough that I don't need you, you need me. I can't fail because Twitter is so big that it cannot be allowed to fail. It is the place where everybody communicates. How could you get rid of it? A cyberpunk dystopia is one where corporations rule instead of politicians. A cyberpunk dystopia is defined by the government being owned by business. That's not good. I mean, you know, still don't get me wrong. It's an entertaining situation, but it's a dark comedy and always has been. The punchline is that everything is terrible. Go play Cyberpunk, and it's a great indictment of the idea. Why would Elon think that he could pull that off? Why did he think that no one would stop him? Why did he think that he could get away with it? Who do you think he is? Apple? Because they've been doing that. For a long time, they had Apple phone chargers. In the EU, you see, the European law requires phone manufacturers to have a common charging connection. This is something that they've always had. Why does Apple not do this? Because they can charge for new cables. If nobody else can make the cables, if nobody else is allowed to make the cables, if they have a patent or a copyright on the cables, then every person who needs a charging cable needs an Apple charging cable. That's free money. That's just free money. Why would they leave it on the table? Why would they choose not to do it? And it would have to be a choice. Why would they choose not to do that? Why would they willingly make the choice to say yes? We'll lower our profits. They were fined an obscenely high amount. And they have changed. But they tried. They said, what are you gonna do? Fine us for billions of dollars? Yes. But I want you to stop and pause and don't take this as a heartwarming story, because it's not. I want you to stop and pause and say, what if they hadn't? What if Apple said no and the EU said, we're giving you a $2 billion fine, and Apple said no? We're not going to pay that. What if they said you're not allowed to operate here and Apple said no? We're going to keep importing and we're going to sell. we're big enough that you can't stop us. What if they made a bid for it? What if they decided that they thought they could get away with it? Disney recently tried to get away with it. Disney, the mouse himself, tried very recently to claim that a lawsuit that was over a death, a literal death on a Disney property, was not able to be litigated. You see, they paid for a dinner. They told the waitress about an allergy. They told them that they had a lethal allergy. It was dairy nuts. It was basically peanuts. The server assured her that it was allergen-free. The server and the staff of the restaurant were like, no, this is fine. You can eat this. That woman is dead. That woman is dead. And Disney said, you cannot sue us because you signed up for Disney Plus. And the terms and conditions clearly state that if you have any sort of legal dispute with Disney, you have to go through arbitration. You can't actually sue us because you signed this thing that says that Disney is immune to the law. Thank you very much, Conley Basher. I appreciate it very much. You signed this thing that says that Disney is immune to the law. Disney lawyers are brilliant. Disney has some of the best lawyers in the industry. Disney has some of the best lawyers in the world. They would not have done that if they thought they couldn't get away with it. They wouldn't have done that if they thought that they weren't going to get away with it, that it wasn't going to work. They wouldn't have done it if they didn't think that they could vote the rules. That the rules were theirs to write, that the government was under their control, that the choices that they made, that the legislation they were going to place down was going to be good enough to overwrite basic human decency. Who's at fault? Who is at fault? Who? Who can you point a finger at and say it's their fault? Whomst? Who? Who can you even say this is their fault that it's happening with? The tragedy of the commons doesn't exist. People don't act that way. But companies do. But a corporation does act that way. Who in the corporation is at fault? You own an oil rig. An oil rig that drills for oil and, well, is fairly clean, eco-friendly oil rig. By and large, you drill for oil and produce oil and sell it. You have a problem. You see, it's a large rig. You generate trash. You generate just general food waste and trash and plastic wrappings and just normal things for working. You know, normal things that people have for living. Personal toiletry waste. You have things in there that need to be removed. It costs you $5,000 a week for trash removal. To get the trash off of your oil rig, to get the trash off of your work environment. You are a executive, you are a worker, you are someone who is there and is answering to higher ups. It costs you $5,000 a week for trash removal. If you toss it overboard, you'll be fined by the local government. You will be fined from the local government. You will have to pay a fine of $3,000 every week for your crimes, for your mistakes, for your punishment. You will have to pay $3,000 every week in fines. That's a business expense. That's a business expense. You say, okay, toss it overboard. It would cost us $5,000 a week for proper removal and sorting and hazardous waste. Well, it'll cost us $3,000 a week for tossing it overboard, and then we save $2,000 every week. I just increased our yearly profits by $52,000 by our yearly profits by $100,000. $2,000 times 52 weeks. You just saved $100,000 by throwing it overboard. Why wouldn't you? Why would you not do that? Why would you choose not to do that? What decision would you make that would make you choose not to do that? Why? You would. You absolutely would. You don't have a choice. You were just following orders. Nobody at the company is to blame. No one. The workers are beholden to the managers. The managers are beholden to the executives. The executives are beholden to the investors. The investors are beholden to each other and also the law. It is literally legally precedented that they must make as much profit as possible. They're just following orders. In the 1940s, a lot of bad things happened. And a defense given by people who did bad things was, I was just following orders, sir. It's not my fault. I didn't do this under my own choice. I did it because I had to. Otherwise, what? Otherwise, you don't work at the oil rig anymore, and you don't know where your next meal is coming from. Otherwise, you are kicked out, and worse, for treason. Otherwise, you have lost the investors' money and are going to be removed from the company. Otherwise, you, the investor, have lost your money and need to put it somewhere else. You can't be to blame. Who's to blame? Nobody is. The company is. The system is. The general concept of blame is to blame. The general idea of the world is to blame. Capitalism, mercantilism, corporatism, corporate oligarchy, anything but an actual answer. These systems exist. These systems can't be destroyed. That'd be absurd. That's just the way things are. I was just following orders, sir. I couldn't do anything about it. If people get free donuts, people won't buy donuts. It's coming down to closing time, and you have an entire stack of donuts that are about to go bad. I mean, it's just a whole bunch of donuts sitting in the case that are not going to be good enough for selling. If you put them in the trash, you might attract people into your trash bins, and we can't have that. Then your area will be known as a place that supports vagrants, that supports homeless. You will have a homeless problem entirely of your own creation. Of course it wouldn't be of your own creation. It's absurd to think that way. Isn't that fundamentally a horrible way of thinking about it? You have to dispose of it. You have to throw it away and destroy it. It's not enough to just toss it, because that can be a problem. You can't give it away, because then people won't buy them. People will just come in the evening and take the day-old ones, and then they won't be buying donuts anymore. You need to make money. You need to make as much profit as possible. You need to destroy all of the grapes that are not sold by pouring kerosene on them. All of the grapes that didn't sell this season post-harvest, well, you'll devalue the rest of the grapes if you give them away. And if you just leave them out, people will come and pick them up, and then they won't buy grapes either. It's not enough to just throw them away. You have to put them in a pile and pour kerosene on it and light them on fire to make sure. Do you see where this is going? To make sure that you know where your next meal is coming from. To make sure that you don't get fired. To make sure that you have a place to sleep tonight. To make sure that you know where your next meal is coming from. It's not my fault. I was just following orders. I have to do this to make the investors happy. I have to do this because what else could I do? You work in the food forest. You go out there and cultivate. You remove any poison oak and poison ivy. You take away any invasive species and make sure that the perennials are replanted every season to make sure that the onions and that the potatoes, that enough of them are there, that they will self-propagate so that people can come in and pick whatever they want. You also help pick for the people who can't make it into the forest so that they can come and simply take what they need. You live in a community where you build homes. You're proud of your homes. You build one every month. They're small 2-story affairs that come up out of the ground and provide shelter and provide enough of an air conditioning that you can live, that the people that live in there comfortably, you know who's going to move into them because they're people in your own community. You make a difference. You sing to the people and bring them happiness and joy and create culture. You create stories that are told and retold, that are entrancing, entertaining, exciting. You keep people on the edge of their seats. You are loved. You're appreciated. You build in a tool, and you know how that tool is going to be used. That sort of society could exist. Not in our current systems, but that sort of society is what humans are made for. We are built for that type of culture, and we could have that. There's nothing that requires us to... There's nothing that prohibits that culture from using an air conditioner. There's nothing that stops technology from working. There's nothing that says you have to fire the entire studio. There's nothing that says that if you create an automated machine, that the people who used to work in there now don't know where their next meal is coming from. Why, quite the opposite. those people no longer have to work. Those people no longer have to work in the society. The society is still making as much money, is still making as much product, is still moving as many things, is still working as well as it was before. But now you don't need those people to work. Why are they still having to work? Why do they still have to wonder where their next meal is coming from? Why have we constructed the torment nexus? Why have we built this world in which this simple level of knowing where life is going to take you, where life is going to lead you, is terrifying? Because somebody who you have never met and have no connection with at all has decided that you die, that you don't know where your next meal is coming from, that you work on the as a cleanup crew. Every time there's a storm, you repair a roof, you pick up the sticks, and you make sure that everything works. That's your job. And you can do it and be proud. You can't work. You broke your leg, you broke your ankle, you have an issue with your mind that stops you from working. You're taken care of. You're supported by a culture that doesn't need you to work. Those grocery attendants don't need to work. They could still be paid the same amount of money, and the company would not lose anything. The company would not lose any money if they replaced those workers with machines and then paid them the same that they were still being paid. There is a small maintenance cost involved in installing those machines. There's a small price to pay for building a loom. You could build the loom, and then the people who used to work for you now get to live the rest of their lives without having to work, because those jobs that they worked are no longer necessary for society to progress, for society to move forward. They are no longer needed for society. And that doesn't mean that they're worthless now. That doesn't mean that they die. That doesn't mean that they no longer need to work. That they no longer deserve to live. They could simply live. They could simply be paid. They could simply imagine if your job is made redundant. I don't mean that you get fired. I don't mean that you messed up. I don't mean... Imagine if your job is made redundant, is no longer necessary. If you were working and automation took your job, if you were paid for the rest of your life with the full knowledge that the company that you worked for hasn't lost a penny in profit, and you get paid for 90% of your pay, including a cost of living increase every year for the rest of your life, that is a world that could exist. Not under our current systems. The only people who have the power to change this are those who have every reason to not change it, because they're the only people who have the power to change this. Have a new yacht, have a new flight, have a new vacation, have a new trip to the moon, or sending a new satellite to Mars, or making more satellites explode. This world that we live in is broken. I don't know if it can be fixed. What I do know is that it can't keep going this way. More and more jobs are no longer necessary. You don't have to do a lot of things. A lot of jobs that you had to do, otherwise the society wouldn't function, now simply are unnecessary. We don't need to have a culture in which everybody works. It's simply no longer necessary. There are new jobs, but the rate at which new jobs are being designed, I mean actually generated and thought of, things like working in renewable energies, where it's a genuinely new job, are not being created at the same rate that people no longer have to have jobs. Corporations are fundamentally incompatible with art. What is art? Art is something beautiful. It's culture. It's creating something that entertains, interests, and that makes your heart soar. It's the thing that makes life worth living. If you build a home, you make someone able to live. If you make a food, then you make someone able to live. If you make art, you make that life worth living. I'm sorry. Your job's been replaced. We don't need you to do that anymore. It's cheaper to make an AI do it. You'll have to find a new job. Or die. I'm sorry. Your job is no longer necessary. We have an AI doing those voices now. You'll have to find a new job. Or you won't know where your next meal is coming from. I'm sorry. You don't have to do this anymore. Therefore, you die. Why do we accept this? Why is this the world that we've built? Why is this what's happening? Do you remember when Star Wars was against the Empire? When the core value of Star Wars is that the Empire is evil and needs to be overthrown? Have you noticed that ever since Disney bought Star Wars, the majority of the stories are set in the Old Republic, where the moral of the story is protect the establishment, protect the status quo? The rebels are now the people fighting to destroy status quo. The rebels are now the bad guys. Think about it. Clone Wars. Think about it. The sequel trilogy, the third trilogy. The First Order are a bunch of holdouts from an older era, quote unquote, but they are the rebels. They are evil because they have to be, but they actually fill the political role of the rebels from the first movies. They are the ones who say the way things are is not untenable, and the moral of the story is no. We should really support the businesses and politicians that are making things the way that they are. That's who needs our help. That's the art that's being allowed to be produced sometimes. Not always. There's still excellent art out there. There's still phenomenal art out there. I do not mean at any moment to imply that there isn't. But you've seen it, right? You've seen it, right? There's less stories just that are about breaking down things, that are breaking down the walls of the world, that are less stories about the rebels overcoming odds to make a better society. Your job is to gather from the food forest. Someone else handles the planting, but you gather and bring food to the town center. Your job as a hunter. You go out and bring food. If every person in our societies worked a 4-hour workday, we could still function as a society. You don't need to be working as often as you do. But you need to know where your next meal is coming from. And if you don't, I'm sorry. Your department's no longer necessary. I'm sorry. That work of art that you made, that incredible game that you produced, that outstanding piece of work that you made is not enough to secure your place in this company. I have struggled lately with the idea that we live in a world that requires people to work in delivery. Amazon drivers. We live in a world that requires people to work in factories. We live in a world that requires people to do basic grunt labor and repetitive coding, and the jobs that are going to the robots are art, music, AI art, AI voices. There are actors who have seen lines be recorded for video games that they did not voice. There is a Naruto game out right now, and the voice actors are looking at it and saying, I didn't record these lines. That's not me, but that's my voice. Those are hours that I should have been working. It's a job that is mine. That character is supposed to be represented by my acting choices, and I wasn't there for this. We live in a world where you have to go to work or you die, but also in a world where all of the jobs that you want to do, that bring happiness, that bring joy, that make life worth living, are being taken away and given to robots. I don't know if I want to live in that world anymore. That's my existential struggle right now. How could I find a purpose? Why would I want to survive in a world where I have to do a menial job or I'll die, and the arts are going to machines? What's the point of taking breath in that world? What happens in the next dystopia? We've seen the dystopia where fallout has come and shattered the world, where the nucleus drop and small bands of raiders gather and small bands of not raiders gather, and both are trying to rebuild the world. We've seen the dystopia where corporations own everything and mercenaries do their best to intervene in between them, and work between the different corporations to try to eke out a living. We've seen this dystopia where the world has been destroyed and is being reclaimed, and the world is being rebuilt and re-energized. We've seen the beauty of the people coming together to work after disasters. Have we seen the dystopia where you're no longer necessary? Have we seen the dystopia where you have to work in a world where there is only suffering? Have we seen the dystopia where everything has gone wrong? In Cyberpunk, the world is shattered because corporations own everything. In Fallout, the world is shattered because nuclear Armageddon fell. In Breath of the Wild, the world is shattered because a demon ran through the world. In our world, it's shattered because corporations who cannot be held to blame by anybody are creating atrocities left and right. The world is shattered. Do you know where your next meal is coming from?